Hello, everybody, and welcome to the RV Repair Club live event for April. Can't believe it's almost May already. It doesn't feel like it outside. It's a little cold. But anyway, my name's Dave Solberg, and I am the managing editor of the RV Repair Club. We might have a couple special guests I want to say hello to. First of all, Don, if you are watching, my father-in-law, every once in a while, he will pull up and bore himself to death. I think that's how he gets to sleep at night. Watching me, and I believe Terry is probably part of one of us. Terry's a good friend of mine that just recently bought a Thor Challenger 2015, and we are going to be doing some work on that with the RV Repair Club in May. Got some fun stuff we're gonna take care of for him. So with that, we'll get going. We got quite a few questions that have already come in. The first one is from Tammy. And Tommy, and he says, "Hey Dave, thanks for your info. One of my 3 heat pumps, 2008, cools intermittently and is starting to loudly hum in between cycles. Any thoughts?" And he says, "I'll hum along with your info. So best wishes." So I think what you're referring to is that you probably have a unit that has 3 air conditioners on the top, and it has a heat pump option in those air conditioners. Coleman has done that. Dometic has done that. And what that does is it literally runs the air conditioner backwards. And it draws BTUs from the outside air and will provide heat to the inside. So if you are connected to a campground pedestal and you've got free electricity, basically, rather than running your furnace and using propane up, you can run your roof air conditioners in the heat pump mode and be able to pull BTUs in. Now, most of those heat pumps in those units will not work anywhere below about 55 degrees. Some of them even a little higher than that, depending on the efficiency of your unit. So the first thing I would check is, what is the temperature outside? If you can get some kind of a temperature sensor and just see what you're doing, you may not have enough of that. The other thing is, I would make sure if it's just one of them pulling it or running cool and not running heat through it, then you're probably somewhere in the compressor. Very possible the filter's in there. So I'd get up and check the evaporator coil and the condenser coil in that unit. And the humming kind of tells me that you're probably looking at a compressor that's drawing a little bit higher amp draw than it should, and a lot of times that is the filter. You got a air filter that as the cold air return first of all, and then you have the evaporator coil and the condenser coil. So if either any of those are plugged, it's going to have a hard time drawing the air. That motor and compressor are going to work harder, and you will get a hum out of that. Something that you might want to do if those are all clean and it's still kind of humming I would definitely get a test and find out what kind of amp draw it is drawing. And you might want to put on a unit that's called soft start. And we're going to do one of these. I've got a couple of them coming, and we're actually going to put them on Terry's unit. And it is a small capacitor that, and I don't know the technical aspect behind the whole thing, but it keeps the amp draw from spiking at the beginning and levels it out during operation. So you can literally use 2 roof airs on a 30 amp service, which you normally can't do. Keystone is putting this on all their 5th wheels now. They're calling it the Solar Flex. So that's something you might want to do, but I would check those filters, the evaporator, those things. I would get an amp draw test on that. And if it's still humming and you do have high amp draw, then you're probably looking at the compressor and the motor in there, and you might be able to get by with a soft start rather than replacing or fixing that air conditioner. So the next one is Monica. When storing a diesel motorhome outdoors for a few weeks or a month at a time with no access to electric hookup, what precautions do I have to maintain batteries, generator, and exterior? So the first thing you want to look at, if you're going to be storing a unit for a few weeks, I wouldn't be too concerned about it, other than the fact you said with the exterior, what what are you going to be exposed to as far as the elements? You can get some fading to start if it's going to be snowing, if it's going to be ice, that type of stuff. I would recommend a cover. AGCO makes a very good cover that is customized for the units and fairly inexpensive. It's ADCO. I just spec'd one out for a reader, and I believe it was about a 32-foot model. It ran about $500, so it was pretty cheap and a great investment to help protect that. As for the batteries, the thing that I would highly recommend with those, couple weeks is not too bad. Disconnect, if you can even literally disconnect the battery cable itself, because your LP leak detector will still draw even if you have a disconnect switch on that. If it's going to be longer than that, you're going to start to get some sulfation. If you have lithium batteries and you go below freezing, if you don't have a battery management system in that shuts them off, or starts a heater in it, you could ruin your batteries. And so in those cases, I would take the batteries out. If you're going to be going longer than a month and you can't plug into electricity, I would try a solar panel if you are going to have it outside, or I would take those batteries out, bring them into a garage, and put them on some type of a maintenance type of a program. But again, if you're outside, you can easily do that with a very inexpensive solar panel. Then the other, let's see, with the electric hookup, batteries, generator. Okay, that was the one I was looking for. And if it's just going to be a month, I would not worry too much about the generator. They do recommend that you run it at 50% load for about 2 hours every month. But if you're only going to be a month, I think you would be okay with that. Make sure you put a little of either like a sea foam in the fuel system. Onan has its own type of a fuel stabilizer but with a diesel, you're not going to get as much varnish. So I don't think you'll have as much problem with that. It's just the seals in there that you want to make sure that they stay nice and pliable. So if it's longer than a month, go out and start it. Pamela, hi, we are fairly new to RVing, but thought we'd taken care of the battery issue when our RV is in storage. We must have missed something because we are still having problems with our battery almost every year. What is a relatively easy way to protect coach batteries when in storage for months? It seems even though we shut everything off and switch on the disconnect button to stop anything from draining the batteries, we still have to jump start them, and our techs always say we need to replace the batteries. The tech wants to sell you batteries. That's what he's telling you. So, they can't tell if that battery needs to be replaced unless they put it onto a charge for 8 hours, get it up to the potential, let it set for 2 hours, and then put a 25 amp draw machine on it and count how long it takes it. Nobody does that. So I would, I hear that all the time, and it's I wouldn't say it's not always false, but they can't tell it that way. What you need and what's happening with your batteries is, even if you shut everything off, when you have the batteries that are sitting there for a long period of time, they are going to naturally drain down. There's no way around it. Shutting it off, if you even taking the disconnect of it, they will drain. One of the things you're not seeing, though, is that when you do the disconnect on it, your LP leak detector is still drawing from that battery because it bypasses that shutoff switch. And the way you can tell is if you take a multimeter or just a simple little 12-volt light tester, and you pull the negative battery cable off and you put one end of the light tester on the negative cable and then the needle on the light meter on your negative post, if it lights up, then you got draw coming out of that. You don't know how much. You can tell that if you're doing the multimeter, but it'll draw about 1 amp, 1.5 amps in that. And within a month, it'll drain that battery down. But just naturally, that battery will drain down 3-4 months without anything in it. So 1 or 2 things you can do, like we just said, get a solar panel that will do a maintenance charge on it, just does like a 2 amp trickle charge, and we'll keep that topped off so it doesn't drain down. Because what happens when you drain it down and you go back to charge it up in the spring, you probably don't have a multi-stage charger, and you're going to get sulfation, and the thicker it gets, It's a big problem with lead acid batteries. We've talked about this many, many times, that this old distribution center here is going to do 13.6 volts. And when it hits 12.6 in the battery, it drops down to 13.2, and it does not get rid of sulfation. So you can either get a solar panel that maintains it in the wintertime, or take the batteries out and put them in your garage and put them on a maintenance type of a program. And that's why they're draining down. I don't, you won't need new batteries every year if that happens, but it's going to be more and more. And if you don't have a multi-stage charger, they're going to sulfate. And so I would highly recommend looking at a Charge Wizard or something that does desulfate those batteries. Linda Kimball says, I have a newly purchased 1998 Winnebago Itasca. After retrieving it from the shop, have discovered it is leaning to the driver's side in the back of the coach. Just replaced new airbags in the front, right and left, and shop is mystified as to what could be causing this. Any ideas? It's a 35-foot. So 1998 Itasca. You could have a Sun Cruiser. You could have a Sun Flyer. I don't know if they're still doing Sun Flyer in 98, close to that. But anyway, I would venture to say, if it's not a diesel pusher, then chances are it is on a workhorse chassis. And you didn't tell me what chassis it is. Maybe if you could put that in the comments a little further down, 35-foot. So on the way that chassis is manufactured is and you've got airbags in the front. And I replaced new airbags in the front, right, and left. So it's very possible that that is a Chevy chassis with coil springs in the front, and those coil springs would have airbags in the inside of it. And those airbags were notorious for leaking, because they would leak a little bit for whatever reason. And then as you went down the road, the springs, as they went up and back, they would pinch those bags and then puncture them, and then they never were any good. But those bags were not designed to level the coach at all, and especially up in the front. So if you have a sag in the back driver's side of the coach, then what I would suggest that you do is get it into a Winnebago dealership, and have them check, and possibly even have get it into a Chevrolet dealership, because the Winnebago dealership can't work on the Chevrolet chassis. So if it's the leaf springs, you do have 2 leaf springs, I believe, in the back of that chassis. Again, if it's, it could be a Ford. Ford would still have leaf springs on the front and the back, but since you replaced the 2 airbags, I'm leaning towards it being a Chevy chassis with those airbags. But again, so the 2 things that you're going to have to look at is, first of all, whatever suspension system is on the back of that and those leaf springs. And it's not uncommon for those springs to break or to sag over time, especially if it's sat with quite a bit of weight on it. I have seen that happen in the past. Or it's also very possible that you got an issue with the outriggers itself. So the chassis may be fine, but the steel outriggers that are welded to it could be sagging. I've seen some of those where you'll get a break in one of the welds of those outriggers, and just the weight of the back end on that. I don't see it much on the Winnebagos. I've seen it more on some other models that don't have quite the structure that the Winnebago has, because I'm very familiar with that. And that was right about the time that I was doing videos for them. So I doubt it's the structure, but I would get that suspension looked at. And again, those front airbags, I don't think are going to do much for leveling that coach. Jim Hallbach says, hi, Dave. We have a newer 2021 Class A with a new F53 V8 chassis. We were just talking about that today. Ford used the V10 for many, many years, and then just recently switched to that new V8. Read a lot about the suspension upgrades and wanted your opinion. Whoops. I got the here. on spending the extra money on a liquid spring system versus the $4,000 to $6,000 upgrade with the track bar, the Coney shocks, radius bars, all that kind of stuff. I understand anyone that has spent the money on the liquid spring systems are happy with the results of reduced driving fatigue, keeping the large RV in the lane while semis and winds are typically pushing RVs around. Thanks, Jim. I had the pleasure of driving a 2022 Allegro on the Ford with the new V8 at the Hershey show. I talked to Liquid Springs, and they had a couple different units out there with that system on it, and it drove like a champ. I could not believe how in the wind, we had a storm coming in, and we were out in some pretty heavy crosswinds and went out on the interstate with traffic, and it just went down the road like a dream. I shot some video of it. We haven't posted any of that up yet. I hadn't really figured a place to put it yet, but you know, it's a $10,000 upgrade. That's the hard pill to swallow. And you know, I look at it from the fact that Ford has made a lot of good improvements. They've made a lot of enhancements in that chassis, but it's still a gas chassis, and it's still going to be affected by wind. You're a billboard going down the road with that stock chassis that's on there. If you're going to go to $4,000 to $6,000 with the Kona springs and all that other stuff in there, you know, I personally think going the step up to the liquid springs is a better move. I think it's also something that will probably keep a little more of the resale value on the backside when you go to sell it or to trade it in, just because of the ride. But it really boils down to, you know, how much time you spend out on the road driving, and what your tolerance level will be. So I've talked to a lot of people, and in fact, even at Hershey, we took out probably six owners. We had 8 or 9 people in the RV sitting around in it, and various people got to drive it. And you know, I listened to the comments, and one guy said, you know, it really rides nice, but you know, we're probably not going to put 1,000, 1,500 miles on the rig a year. We're not doing the glory trip. We're not going to Alaska. We're not going to here. And I think it also depends a little bit on the length. And you didn't say what the length was in yours. You know, if you're down into 33 foot, 34 foot, you're probably, you know, be okay with a typical driving situation. You know, but once you start getting into that heavier unit, and you got a lot more weight that's going to be able to sway around with the, you know, the characteristics of the road is one thing. You know, you're driving a billboard down the road again. So, but the smaller ones are going to be affected more by wind. So it's, again, it really boils down to your tolerance level and what you like. Now, the thing I like about you know, the liquid spring stuff, it's an aftermarket. They haven't, I don't know of anybody yet that is offering it at the factory, except when you could take it into customer service, like at Winnebago or something like that. I haven't seen it as an option yet, but that's not to say it hasn't been. But it looks like you have already got the unit. So I would say, you know, make sure that chassis is up to specs. Make sure that, you know, your shocks are good, that anything in the suspension system is verified first. And if you don't like the ride, and if you're nail biting and you're white knuckling it, and your wife is screaming at you, or your partner's screaming at you, whatever it happens to be, then the liquid springs is definitely a great product. So it's kind of personal preference. Tammy Bertosini. That's a cool name, as Elf would say. What's the best way to fix a failing seam on a Jayco Featherlight roof? What material, as far as the sealant and technique, should be used? Okay, so a failing seam on a Jayco Featherlight roof. I guess I'm gonna need a little more information, Tammy. I'm not sure if you're talking about a seam on the rooftop, of that. And what material is that? Is it a rubber membrane? What material as far as a sealant and technique should be used? Rubber membrane, fiberglass, you know, if it's the exterior roof you're talking about, or if it's the interior roof you're talking about. And I have seen where some of the older units, they'll use either a padded vinyl or a hair cell like this. You look at this unit right here, and this is just kind of a hair cell type of a fabric, and it's glued, and it's just got a little kind of a woven backing material to that. And I have seen where moisture gets penetrated inside there, and it will separate and it will sag, especially the vinyl, the padded vinyl, because that's got kind of a foam that will crumble on the backside. But if you could give me a little more information on that, and just let me know what seam, what area you're talking about, I have a better idea of which material it is and how to fix it. If it is the interior, again, it depends on if it's the padded foam or if it's the vinyl like this. Now, one of the things that I've done a couple times is, one, with the padded foam, we cut across the seam area that was sagging, and this one had about every 4 feet, it had a trim piece up there. So they didn't use a one-piece fabric all the way to the back. And we pulled the trim down, and we went in and cut about halfway in between the two seams, sliced a nice cross section in there, went in with a vacuum and vacuumed out every loose piece of foam we could up in there. We found a spray adhesive that wouldn't deteriorate the foam that was still up there. And then above that, we had Luan paneling, so we didn't have to worry about that. But you want to make sure you get an adhesive that you go to we went to an auto store and got an adhesive that was designed for fabric panels on headliners and side panels of cars. And then we tested it a little bit just to make sure that it wouldn't start to deteriorate and eat away at that foam. And then what we did is we sprayed it in there really, really good, pulled it as far as we could on one way, so it literally overlapped where we had made that cut in there. And then we were going to come back and cut the excess off of there. But then what we did is we took a piece of paneling that was as the width of the side and 4 feet wide, and put a couple 2x4s and just let that cure for 3 or 4 days. Then we came back in, trimmed off the excess piece, and then we went in and actually screwed a piece of wood trim up there to hold that in place at a couple different levels, and then even replaced the white vinyl trim that was in there with that wood trim because it was stained the same color as the side, and it looked factory installed. And it lasted 2 or 3 years till we sold the unit. It was my folks' unit, the first one we did. And so the second one, we did a very similar thing with that. We just got an adhesive that was designed more for that hair cell. But anyway, let me know if you're talking about the roof, outside roof stuff, then it's a little different situation. Okay, so we have Lisa Jaggers. I purchased the 1994 Ford Econoline Travelmaster 30-foot and found light water damage in the outside rear wall, not into the inside wall yet. Is this a pretty easy fix, or will it be costly? That's very hard to say without actually seeing it and be able to figure out, what kind of damage it did to the interior of it. Because here is what your back wall is going to look like. This is about the same as the side wall. You will have an interior paneling, which is called Luan. And then after that, you will have probably block foam insulation. Now, I don't know with your Travelmaster, you'll either have block foam like this, or you will have loose fill like you would see in a residential style in that. And then another Luan paneling, and inside that you would have some framework like this around the perimeter, maybe a couple in. There's no uniformity in what framework they have in these units, especially in 94. You might even have with yours wood, they call it stick and tin. And then on Luan here, and then an outside fiberglass. I think your Travel Master probably has the Mesa sidewall, it's called. It's ribbed instead of this flush, and it comes in about 18-inch seams, so you have those up there. The fix, I guess the first thing I would do is find out where the water leak came from. More than likely, it's the roof to the back wall trim area along that back side. I would get all that stuff off of there, put all new self-leveling sealant, even maybe a strip of Eternabond tape on the top of that, and then new trim over the top. The only way you can fix that back wall is to basically take that exterior fiberglass off, and that is expensive. That is very expensive. So you might be able to get by without doing that. And I don't know what that moisture damage looks like, if it's started to delaminate and you got big air pockets in the back, or what. But that's how it's manufactured. So if you can do a little bit of digging and find out, you have a better idea of how far you got to go to get that fixed. Glenn Sturr says, my rig is a Sportsmobile camper van, 2000 Dodge Ram 3500. I currently have a good system using one 115 amp hour BGM battery. I would say probably AGM battery. I have a good system using 115 amp hour BGM. So I think it's AGM, absorbed glass mat. But I'm interested in the longer boondocking time with a lithium Fe PO4 battery. And so what that is a lithium iron phosphate. And so that's what the new lithium battery is. How hard would it be to substitute the lithium for the AGM? Okay, we did have AGM. My REDARC DC to DC charger has a lithium setting. My Intella power converter charger does not, although the same company, Progressive Dynamics, makes one that is for lithium batteries. And it's kind of ironic because we just did a gold section here from 4 to 4:30, and we hit this exact point here, and talk about lithium and so forth. So the first thing I recommend is that, you want to go longer charging, longer boondocking. The lithium battery, a good lithium battery is going to cost you about $1,000. That upgrade for your converter is going to cost about $250. And so you have to decide you're going to do, you've got one 115 amp hour AGM battery now. So you're getting only half the use out of that. So you're getting 50 amp hours, 52.5. The one lithium battery will give you 100 amp hours. You'll get 100% out of that. So it's going to give you better power, longer power. It charges faster, and it will last 3,000 to 4,000 cycles. So it's going to pay for itself over the long period of time. The first thing you want to do is you want to look at the quality of the lithium batteries. There's 3 different cells that they can buy, and a lot of the cheaper battery companies are going to use the less expensive cells. They do not have UL listings for them. They come from overseas. They are very cheaply built, and they will not hold up in an RV. A lot of those are made for solar systems that are on houses, and the batteries are all stuck inside in a warm condition. They don't bounce down the road. They're not exposed to the elements, all that kind of stuff. I am a big fan of Expion 360. I started out working with Zamp Solar 7-8 years ago when they were at the California RV show, brought product and showed their system and how the quality of the solar panels to start with. And John Yozamp started that company. He sold the company to Dometic and started Expion 360 because he was an avid RVer. He hikes and backpacks and does all that stuff. And he was frustrated first with the solar panel quality that was out there, and then frustrated with the battery quality. And so he started Expion 360. His brother Joel and I have had several conversations on the quality of what their system is. Other manufacturers or companies don't even build them. They're buying them from overseas, and he calls them lick and stick. They take a label and lick it and stick their name on it. and call it a lithium battery. There's a lot of, if you go to xbn360.com, you'll see, a lot of the technical information. The other big thing in battery quality is how those cells are connected. So there are 24, 28, 30, I don't know how many cells in this battery bank, but they all need to be connected. And the cheaper batteries are going to use a soldering connection. And you can imagine what solder is going to do in cold weather, in bouncing, in heat changes, all this kind of stuff. They just don't last. And so you want a mechanical connection. And you can kind of tell the difference when you start looking in and asking the questions. And if they'll show you what's inside their battery on their website or wherever, then you can tell. If they don't, then I would walk away. I would not get that battery. The other thing you want to look at is a battery management system within this battery, because it will adjust the charge for individual cells in there. And I won't go through the whole thing, but the big issue, in my opinion, is if you're going to be camping in any kind of cold weather below freezing, these lithium batteries do not like to take a charge on the cold weather side of things, and you could ruin that battery. The battery management system will either shut the battery off temporarily until the temperature comes back up so you don't ruin it, or you can buy a heat pad, and that BMS will start the heat pad so your battery is not below freezing, and you're able to charge it back up, which is the intent of it. So once you figure out the battery, the next thing is you got to look at your charging system, which you have done. And the typical chargers are going to, like this one here. This happens to be I believe it's Progressive Dynamics. Anyway, we've got the one that we're working on is a WIFCO. It's like this, the all-in-one distribution center converters, which this is your battery charger, are going to do about 13.6 volts. And the lithium batteries want 14.6. And if you have a charger like this in here, you're not going to get the full potential out of that lithium battery. Like you said, I think you mentioned Progressive Dynamics. So the PD4886, I believe, is the one we're going to use in this, because this WIFCO converter will only do 13.6. So we're going to lose about 35% of the capacity of that lithium. So we're paying $1,000 and we're losing quite a bit of money that we're not going to use. But you can upgrade that for about $250, put that in to an existing one, and that will give you that 14.6 that lithium battery wants. You also have to look at the fact if you have an inverter like this one, and I see where Progressive Dynamics, do you know if this is a simple swap? So it's not a simple swap unless you know what you're getting. Do you have a solar panel? Does it have a charge controller? The other concern you have to look at is whatever type of charger you have, or inverter with a charger, or solar panel system with the charger. If it has a multi-stage charge and it goes 15 to 16 volts to start with, which is called a bulk stage, you will ruin your lithium battery. So just doing a little bit of research on finding, what you have for that. If you do use that WD, do you have a solar panel system with that? And I do like the REDARC DC to DC charger. What that does is it regulates the charge from your tow vehicle or your engine alternator. You got a camper van with the Dodge. So I don't know what size alternators in that, but these Mercedes have 225 amps that they're charging two engine batteries with. And so now you're able to throw that into your lithium batteries if you don't have this DC to DC charger in line to that. Victron makes one as well, the REDAC model. And I also see that XBN360 has one on their site too. So those are the things you want to look at if you're looking to go to lithium. It's an easy swap once you do all that. So Mark has a 30-foot Airstream Classic Excella with one roof mount air conditioner, duotherm model 610015. Would you add another one in the back bedroom? If yes, would you put in a Dometic Penguin to 15,000 BTU air with a heat pump. I'm not a big fan of the heat pumps. You know, they've been around for many years. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them other than the fact that you get below 50 degrees, 55 degrees even, and they don't work. You don't have enough BTUs in the air, because they pull air from the outside, and they actually pull BTUs or heat from that outside and heat that air going through the compressor coil. It literally runs backwards from what I understand of the air conditioning side of it, the cooling side of it. And you know, some people like them. Most people I've talked to say, you know, the amount of time they can use it is so small. And the only thing you're doing really is you're just saving a little bit of propane. I personally, I like the onboard heaters, whether Suburban or, you know, dual hydroflame. The other thing I do is when I go camping, if I'm going to be hitting some areas that's going to dip into a little cool, I bring either an Olympian or a Camco or a Mr. Heater. Do I have one? Yeah. Come on. There we go. So this is a Mr. Heater version, I believe. Yep, Mr. Heater. It's just called the Portable Buddy. And all you do is you hook up your source here. Let's see if we can get this to actually light. Now you can put this in an RV and actually hardwire it or hard plumb it, I guess you would call it, to your LP system on the inside of it. But what I like about this is it uses no battery power. It uses no 120. It doesn't doesn't take from your propane system on the side. And so I think we can get the pilot. Remember how to work this thing. I see it sparking down there, but I am pretty sure we have run this little guy out of, yep. So we're out of propane. Try to figure out, how do you tell here? Yeah, I heard nothing coming out, but it's one of the safest portable heaters that you can use. You have no carbon monoxide that comes out, or just such a small trace that it doesn't do anything with it. But you know, they're nice to have because you don't have to always heat the entire inside of your RV when you're out camping. You might just want to do the living room during the day or the bedroom at night. So in my opinion, that's kind of nice. I wouldn't do the additional air heat pump in that back side of it. And you know, as far as the Penguin, right now, from what I have seen, and I've worked through Northern Wholesale Supply and several places, that Penguin is hard to find right now. Just the supply issues and 600,000 new RVs being built last year and projecting for this year too. It's going to be hard to find those. And so I guess with a 30-foot camper, you know, it seems a little bit overkill to put a 15,000 BTU air conditioner in the back of that. But it all depends on where you're camping and what the temperature is and how hot it is. And you know, if you don't have, normally Airstream, and you didn't put the year, but Airstream has a ducted system, so you could shut some of the front vents off and get it to the back if it's open there. And again, I don't know on that 30-footer if it is or not. Penguin's a great air conditioner. You know, Dometic makes an absolutely fantastic one. One thing you might want to look at that I have seen a lot of people around here do is a product called RecPro, RECPRO. They make refrigerators, air conditioners, quite a few things as an aftermarket product. One of my relatives actually is in charge of owner relations at Winnebago, and he said that they've got a gravel pit kind of lake pond that they've created a nice little campground that people keep their units there year round, and that there are many, many people that have put the RecPro product in once they've had problems with other stuff, and they love it. And the price is about probably not quite half, but it's very attractive. So that's something that I would take a look at. We have a 20-foot trailer, camping trailer, and when hooked, and this is Steve, when hooked up to my truck, the front of the camper is a bit low by maybe 2 to 4 inches out of level. I've been told that being low in the front is better than being high, but I'm concerned about how the refrigerator will function in this position. But isn't that only when using propane? And since we are supposed to run with the gas turned off, perhaps that's a non-issue. Perhaps you could elaborate. So it's, if you can get it closer to the 2 inches than the 4 inches, I think the 4 inches is a little too much, not for the refrigerator as much, because you think about it, when you're traveling down the road, even if that refrigerator is running, and I don't recommend running on propane, but you know, even if it's an absorption refrigerator, all that has to happen is once that gets up to the top, if you're running it off a 12 volt, or if you're running it off of an inverter through 12 volt and 120, it's going to heat that solution. That solution just needs to make its way back down the cooling units to get back down to the burner vessel and start the process over again. Now, when you're stationary and you're less than 3 degrees front to back, 6 degrees, 3 degrees side to side, 6 degrees front to back, then it's going to have a problem getting through there. And 4 inches might be too much. But when you're traveling down the road, you have enough road movement on that trailer that you don't have to worry about that cooling unit. You know, I've seen units that have been running with the generator on in motorhomes. I've done it myself many times. You know, have I driven with the propane on? Yes, I have. I don't think it's a good idea. You know, but back in my younger days, I did a lot of things that weren't good ideas. I'm pretty sure my dad would attest to that. My wife even attests to it now. But you know, I wouldn't worry about that. What I would be kind of concerned about is, first of all, if you're 4 inches lower, you can submarine with that unit, and you're putting a lot of pressure on that hitch and that ball and everything else. And more important is you're going to have a lot of highway hop. That unit is not going to ride well when it goes down the road. And so I would say, you know, if you're low by 4 inches on that front end, I would definitely take a look at the hitch and see if you can't get, when hooked to my truck, the front of the camper is a bit low. So 2 things you can look at: the hitch itself, weight distribution hitch. 3 things, I'm sorry. You may want to look at airbags for your truck. And we've done that quite a few times, where the suspension of the truck was to a point where it was designed more for a nice, comfortable ride. And then when you put something on the back of it, it had a tendency to go down. And so we added, and you didn't say what kind of truck. We did it on a Ford F-250. We did it on a Chevy Silverado 2500 and a 1500. But you can get airbags at just about any truck specialty place around for about $300. They're a little more expensive if you get the kind that has the hoses that come out, and you know, because you want to let the air out when you're not towing. Otherwise, you get a pretty high deal. So those are the things that I would look at for that. Okay, where are we at? 40. Do the black and gray water tanks have to be completely empty before storing for the winter? You know, I guess in my opinion, I think they should be. I think they should be stored. They should be cleaned. I would also use a little bit of what's called tank blaster. I'm going to grab that right here. This is just a good product to get that stuff out of there, because you know, you can really cake that stuff up, and then your monitor panel readings won't be right. You'll have that smell that will sit in there for absolutely forever. And, you know, sometimes has a tendency to make its way back up through seals and especially if they have a cheater vent underneath the bottom of it. And I think the big thing is if you don't have it empty, then your spade valve, which is going to be right here, has it's got a seal both the inside and out. But you know, so on this side, let's say, is where your tank is at. So you got all that crud sitting in there, and it's starting to solidify, and it's starting to get harder and harder, and it's going to just eat up that seal, and it's going to crud all the way around here. So you might have quite a bit of issue with the operation of your valve and eventually ruin that seal in there. So I personally like to empty them out, clean them out really good, run a little tank blaster through them, and then how come I have 2 toilet seals? There we go. And then use a little drain valve lubrication. And all this does is you, after emptying the holding tank, close the valves, pour 1/5 of the bottle into each holding tank, and you know, then just use, let it sit there. Use it as normal, it says. So you can just put that in there, and you know, if you're going to store it, you wouldn't put any antifreeze or any water in it. I would just leave it like that. So put this tank blaster. Both Thetford products really, really work well. Okay. And tastes wonderful. No, just kidding. So, oh yes, and I forgot. Katie says to let everybody know that make sure you sign up. We are doing a drawing for $100 gift cards for gasoline. So those of you that have a diesel pusher, that means the 5 or 6 gallons. That's pretty good. And but also we will be live at the top of the hour when, oh, wow, we're way behind on the questions. Okay, so Theodore says, 2003 Winnebago Journey. Do you test the actuator on the keyless entry system? How do you test the actuator on the keyless entrance system? There is a transmitter located in the coach to be able to reset the remotes. Where is the transmitter? I'm not positive about that, Theodore. I do believe that that is a Bauer system, B-A-U-E-R. Normally the ones that we installed, we put one in a trailer. So you might want to take a look at, go in and Google search a keyless RV entry system and see the one we put into the Raptor. Otherwise, I would recommend giving Winnebago Owner Relations a call and talk to them about it. You can actually go on, if you go to winnebagoind.com, I believe it is, and then go to the owner resources, you can get wiring diagrams and 3D schematics of your unit going clear back into 1990s at some point. I do that quite a bit for people, but just go in there and go in, you'll see it says plumbing and electrical and so forth, or 3D, and go to your year, 2003 Winnebago, and the model number 35J or whatever it happens to be, and you should be able to trace that down and find that out. Most of the that I've seen is the transmitter is located right in the mechanism itself, but I've learned to never say always or never say never when it comes to RVs. So try giving them a call and seeing and look at that video. Eric says a 2013 Jayco Greyhawk. Did we have Eric listed before? Where? Okay, I don't see where Eric was. There's no question with it. So if we got time, Eric, we got about 9 minutes. So hi, Dave. James says, I have a 5th wheel RV. Hi, James. How do I safely jack the RV for maintenance or to change a tire? The manufacturer says not to jack using the axle or the suspension, which I do agree with. 2018 Jayco Eagle. You want to find there's got to be a point on the frame somewhere that they recommend to jack those up. And I know we've worked with CoachNet for many years. CoachNet is a roadside assistance as well as technical assistance and so forth. And one of the big concerns that we had when I was at Winnebago originally was when CoachNet finds a tow company to dispatch and go pick up the unit, you can't just grab that unit anywhere you want to and drag it down the road. You'll pull the front end off it, you'll pull the back end off of it. So there's specific points that are on those rigs that are designed to take the stress of that being jacked up or towed or whatever. Usually, and I agree, you don't want to use the axle itself or to jack that up, because you could bend the axle depending on the weight of it. Now, some of the manufacturers have reinforced the actual brackets and the knuckles for those axles, and they recommend to place the jack there. But your owner's manual should have the exact spot on that vehicle where you should be able to use the jack. If not, then I would recommend, you said it was a Jayco, so that is owned by Thor now, but I think Jayco still runs all the technical support for that. But you should be able to give them a call. And I just talked to the Thor representative today, and they are wonderful to work with. Give them a call, and they should be able to give you the specific spot on the frame itself, or a point that they have designated and reinforced to be able to jack that up. Ziggy says, hi Dave, just signing in. I have a 2003 Mallard 26-foot fifth wheel in great condition. Is it okay to connect a 12-volt 100 amp battery to a 12-volt 220 amp hour battery? Yeah, you can. The problem you're going to have with something like that is that 100 amp hour battery is going to drain faster and start pulling from your other battery in there, because it's going to, kind of like two 5-gallon buckets going in there. So I don't, and it's not lithium, I don't think, if you're talking about lead acid. So typically it's not a good idea to do that, because that's going to drain down, and they're going to have different points of it. We almost always recommend matching amp hour to amp hour. And if you got one battery in there and you go to put it's not at 100%, and you go put a second battery in there, that older, weaker battery is going to draw that new one down and start to ruin it really fast. So I would say that you probably, depending on the year of that 220 amp hour one, you're probably best to match it up. Al says, and where are we at? 5 minutes. Okay. Al says, I have a 2020 Thor 27-footer. We park on the driveway. Rear is 8 inches lower than the front. Is that bad to put the slide out when it's not level? I think it is. I have always been a fan, or not a fan. I've always recommended that you level and secure the coach before you run the slide room out, because when we were at Winnebago, we tested for over 4 years before we brought out a slide offering in the unit, and we tried a variety of different mechanisms. We went with HWH. We saw when a coach is not level, the chassis can twist. Even if you're on a driveway that's level from side to side, and you're still putting some stress or some pressure with that weight kind of with the sidewall. So anything that the chassis can move, the sidewall can move, the room is now resisting your motors, all that stuff. I think it's a big issue with slide rooms, and misalignment and not working over time is when people don't level and put them out. Now, having said that, if you do it once in a great while, if it's not a big heavy slide, you might be okay. And I know Integra is a company that claims bring the slide room out first and then level the coach. We've had this discussion with them many times. There's an engineer in Integra that knows more than the slide mechanism company. I've talked with Power Gear. The engineer that designed the Power Gear system is now working for Lippert, and he was with Power Gear. They bought him, and he says, I have argued and argued with the Integra people to level the coach first and stabilize it, and they say the opposite. So I think it's important to level it and to stabilize it. How do I feel about that? Well, so again, Katie says, enter yourself into the RV Repair Club gas sweepstakes for a chance to win the $100 gift card. Go.rvrepairclub.com, and so you can click down underneath the brackets here. So Angela Bachman has a 2016 Heartland fuel toy hauler. I've got a leak at the top of the slide that I can't track down. Any ideas where I should be looking for? I guess, that's one of the gremlins, we call it, when you got a leak, because it's not always leaking from where it starts to enter the coach. But I would say if it's on the top of the slide, the first thing I would look at is your actual roof itself. It could be that the roof to sidewall joint of your toy hauler has a spot where the sealant has separated, pinholes, cracks, whatever, getting moisture in there and running down the inside of the sidewall and then coming out on top of the slide. I have seen that before. It could be traveling along your drip rail where, and I'm assuming you don't have an awning, because most of the toy haulers don't have an awning over the roof itself. So it could be that you're getting a pool up in the top of it. There is a bulb seal, which I do not have down here. I have it upstairs, darn. But at the top, on the cutout of the sidewall, there is a bulb seal at the top. And sometimes they have a flap, sometimes they don't. But you can get moisture in between that. It might be that your slide room has started to get out of alignment a little bit. If it's sagging, if it's not connecting up there, either in or out, and sometimes it's hard to tell when that moisture gets in there. There's times it'll get in there and it'll stay in the tubing, the hollow tubing, or some other place until you take off and move, and then all of a sudden it goes with the flow and comes out somewhere else. So I would say you're going to really need to get up there and look at that seal all the way around the outside. Check the roof itself, and it might be short of just putting a hose up there and going in with a flashlight and just digging around every compartment, every opening, every side panel you can possibly look at and see if you can find it. Ernie says, hi, Dave. Hi, Ernie. I have a 2016 Winnebago Viva 23L on the Ram 3500 ProMaster chassis. So you have a gas-powered unit, I'm pretty sure, purchased it in February. When I use the emergency flashers, my dash shows an error telling me that I have a bulb out, and it goes to hyper flash, but only on the dash. All the bulbs are working, and the flash is at normal rate. Turning the ignition off and back on clears it, and it works fine unless the emergency flashers are used. I have an extended service plan, but how to know if it's chassis or coach problem? So if it happens with the emergency flashers, then it's a coach problem. Winnebago doesn't tap in to any of that stuff other than running wires back to the bulbs. And if all the bulbs are working and all the flashers are flashing correctly in the components that Winnebago put on it, then it leads me to believe that it's something in either the switch itself or the relay that's on the chassis supplied fuse panel. But I would say I would check with your your extended warranty, and just see if it's something that would be covered by them. The other thing you might be able to do is if you can get the code reader, you might, if it gave you an error message, a lot of those errors will stay in the computer system for quite a long time. And then you can get a code reader that comes in and maybe gives you a little different information other than just error on what it is. So I've never run into that. One other thing I would recommend is to call Winnebago Owner Relations and talk to them. They are outstanding experts at it. And anytime I have an issue like something like this, I go to them and I get it taken care of pretty quickly. If it's a chassis thing, they'll switch you right to a Dodge dealer. But time to wrap up. She says we're at 6:02 here. Pamela has a 2005 Winnebago. I'm just going to do one more. My question is related to the batteries, and even with the disconnect switch, still not holding a charge while in storage. And I think we covered that. You know, your batteries are even if you hit the disconnect switch, the LP leak detector is going to draw from that. You know, we talked about how you could tell, use a simple light tester, 12-volt light tester, take the negative cable off, put the clamp on that, put the point on the negative battery terminal, and if the light hooks on, you got something drawing on that. Could be a stereo, radio, a variety of different things that you think is doing it. Even with that disconnect, you'll probably see that light come on. But you need to either get a solar panel to charge that or take those batteries out and charge them in a garage somewhere else if you can't plug that unit in when you're storing it. So with that, sorry we couldn't get to the other ones. And just looking at, we got a Stanley Hilton, can a roof AC be recharged? No, it's a closed system. It's not designed to be recharged like you do at your home or your automobile. So with that, sorry we didn't get to these other ones. I'm going to try to get in there and answer them here in the next couple days, or we'll bring them back up with us next month when we do this again. But appreciate everybody coming, and enjoy the weekend. Again, Terry, if you're watching, Don, you're asleep by now. I'm sure you are already, but take care, everybody. I miss you. So with that, thanks for coming and have a great week. Holy chingawas.